Hi, I'm Doug Young, and I'm here at Dream Guitars with a wall of wonderful guitars behind me. And we're going to do a series of 3 videos. This is the first one, exploring ways to play expressively when we're playing solo fingerstyle guitar. We want to work on making things flow and creating fluid melodies. And I'm going to use a really simple tune, Amazing Grace, that you probably know. So let me start by explaining a little bit about what I'm talking about. There are lots of ways to play songs on the guitar. For example, here's a very traditional finger-picking way to play this tune. So that was a very straightforward version of the tune, and there's really nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly fine way to play the tune. But it's not particularly expressive, at least to me. The notes were all there, but there wasn't much style or much interest in the way it was being played. So we're going to try to change that in this video. So one challenge when playing fingerstyle guitars, we have to do everything. Bass, melody, chords, so we really have our hands full. And in this first video, I want to start out by simplifying things, not worrying about the bass and the harmony. Let's just play the melody and see what we can do to make it flow, completely unconstrained by playing all the accompaniment. I want to play it the way a lead guitar player might play the melody if all they had to do was play the melody, or maybe the way a singer would sing the melody. So I want to look at a collection of techniques that we can use on the guitar to play a melody more expressively and more fluidly. And many of these ideas may be familiar, especially if you've played electric guitar, played lead guitar, but it's still worth going through the process when you're working up an arrangement and trying to explore the melody using these techniques before you get locked into playing it around a chord-based approach. In the first video, we'll look at the melody. In the second video, we'll address the challenges of applying these techniques while adding back in the accompaniment. And then finally, there'll be a third video where I'll walk through a finished fingerstyle arrangement of the tune, and hopefully we'll see how it all comes together. So let's get started with the first technique, number 1. When you listen to a singer, one thing you'll notice is that they use dynamics. People don't sing or even talk like, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. That's what a computer might do. But people will emphasize certain words or syllables more than others. Even talking, you'd say, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. And you have certain syllables that come out stronger than others. So let's start by adding that to our playing certain notes louder than others just by picking harder. For example, something like this. And that's maybe a little exaggerated, but you want to practice doing that and adding those dynamics. You can pick different notes to play louder or softer, but what I'd suggest is singing the tune or listening to a singer and pay attention to which notes get emphasized and then try to emphasize those same notes when you play. That'll make it sound more like a vocal performance or more like a solo performance. So the second thing is timing. Solo singers, if you were to listen to a singer play this song, they wouldn't play the notes exactly the way they're written on paper. The paper's very stiff, quarter notes, half notes, and so on. Instead, they'll anticipate notes, and they'll hold certain notes over a little bit. So, for example, instead of playing, we might jump into a few notes a little faster. Just be a little more legato and a little more free with the timing and the way you play that melody. And again, I'd suggest listening to a singer perform the tune, try to copy their timing, or even just sing it yourself. You'll do this kind of thing naturally when you sing, whether you're a good singer or not. It also helps to slow things down a little bit and allow yourself time to be expressive. So the third thing is to look at how we can connect the notes in the melody and make them flow a little bit better. Singers and many other instruments can smoothly glide between notes, which is actually difficult on the acoustic guitar because there's sort of an attack. The note attacks and it decays very quickly. But there are several techniques we can use to smooth things out a bit. And these are things like hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, and bends. So let's take a look real quickly. You may be familiar with these, but let me talk just about the basics of how the mechanics of doing those things, and then we'll look at how they're applied. So a hammer-on, of course, is just to play a note, and then you pick it, and the second note we'll just hammer on with our left hand finger, like that. That creates a slightly smoother attack. A pull-off is the opposite. When we go down, I'll pick a note, we'll pull off. And then, of course, a slide is simply to play a note and without lifting your finger, move up to the other note. Now, you can use these in both simple and complicated ways. For example, I can hammer, bend, or slide between multiple notes, or slide, and really get a lot of different effects. We can also either move smoothly between two notes of the melody very slowly, or we can do a sort of a quick grace note. So, for example, let's look at Amazing Grace. I might play it something like... Now, the other thing we can do to get a little bit of smoothness into a guitar melody is to introduce string bends. And again, a string bend is pretty simple. You've probably done them. You hold a note down, play it, and then just push or pull the string. Now, if you're playing electric guitar with thin strings, light gauge strings, you could probably play a melody like Amazing Grace by bending between melody notes. On an acoustic, that's pretty hard to do, but we can still use bends for just little expressive devices. When singers sing, sometimes they just hit a note a little bit flat and then they move up to it, and we can do that kind of thing. Or even just as a little ornamentation going into a note. So again, something like adds a little bit of an effect to the tune and can juice up the melody a little bit. Another important technique is vibrato. And let's look at the mechanics of that if you haven't done this before. There are three basic ways to create vibrato on the guitar. The first is classical style. You play a note and you move your finger back and forth laterally in the same direction as the string. Now, this actually works a lot better on a nylon string guitar than a steel string. It's kind of hard to do on a steel string. The second type of vibrato is the sideways vibrato. It's sort of the rock and roll vibrato, where you're actually bending the string. You can push it or you can pull it. And that's much easier to do on steel strings. The third type of vibrato is more of a chorus effect that you do by moving the guitar itself. And it's not really vibrato, it's more chorus, but it has a similar effect. And this is a really useful technique because you can add vibrato to whole chords that way. So the final technique that I want to talk about is just to explore different locations on the guitar for playing the melody. This is actually something that's somewhat unique to the guitar, that there's multiple places on the guitar to play the same note, and it actually enables a lot of things that we've already talked about. For example, different positions create different tones. If I play a C here, or here, or here, we get a different tone. But we also get different fingerings, which provide opportunities for these hammer-ons, bends, slides, and vibrato. If I'm playing the guitar down in the first position, there aren't really many places that I could play a melody like Amazing Grace using hammer-ons or pull-offs down here. But if I move up to the fifth position, there's a lot of more room and a lot more opportunity for playing these sort of things. So we can also play the melody, down an octave or up an octave on the guitar, which is both a expressive technique and an arrangement technique. If you're playing on the higher strings, they're thinner, and it's easier to bend strings, for example. So that technique works better up high. If you're on the lower strings, you get a different tonality, and you can also get a nice vibrato on the lower strings. So let's finish up this first video by contrasting a very straight way to play just the melody and compare it to how it might sound with some of these techniques applied. Here's a very cut and dry first position version of the melody using none of these techniques. And now let's try it and see how many of the things that we just talked about we can apply. I'll move up to the fifth position and we'll dress it up a little bit. Hopefully the second version sounds a little more musical, a little more interesting. I'd suggest spending some time, exploring this melody, or take some melody of your own that you like, even something you wrote, and try to use all these techniques without playing all the accompaniment and all the other parts, and see what you come up with. There's actually many more techniques. This is a very small set, but these are a good place to start, and a good place to start exploring what you can do. Incidentally, it has a side benefit that everybody makes different choices of where to apply these types of things, and everybody sounds just a little bit different when they do them. Everybody's string bends and hammer-ons will be a little bit different. So nobody does them exactly the same way, and the way you use these techniques will become an aspect of your own personal style. So playing single line melodies is just the first step, of course. And in the next video, video 2, we're going to look at how we can start to develop a fingerstyle arrangement, adding in bass notes and chords, hopefully without losing these stylistic elements that we've just talked about. Have fun exploring these techniques, and when you're ready, I'll see you in the next video.